The day the DNA test came back, my whole life shattered. 3 years of lies, his eyes in my son's face, the secret trysts echoing in the hollow victory of a courtroom. They couldn't bury the truth with my husband, and now I'm the one haunted by the ghost of a love that was never meant to be. But even in the wreckage, a flicker of hope might survive, if I can just untangle the mess I've made. The steak sizzles on the grill, a perfect sear, but I barely notice it. My eyes keep straying across the table to him. Jason. He's been in our lives forever, my husband's best friend since they were kids. I've known him longer than I've known my own brother. But something's shifted, a charge in the air between us. Did I imagine his smile lingering a touch longer when he passed me the salad? A joke whispered at the table, meant just for my ears. I'm being ridiculous. This is Jason, for God's sake. A week later, I'm sweating over a stack of invoices at the kitchen counter, trying to keep my mind on our business. Jason stops by to drop off something for my husband. I haven't even changed out of my yoga pants, and of course, the coffee pot chooses this exact moment to spew and splatter. Damn, I swear, grabbing a dish towel. His eyes crinkle in amusement. Let me help, he steps closer, and before I can protest, his hands are on the buttons of my shirt. I freeze. There it is, he says, pointing at a coffee speck, then reaches inside my collar. I should pull away, but it's like I'm glued to the spot. I see the birthmark on his shoulder, a tiny crescent moon I've somehow never noticed before. A few days later, my brother's throwing one of his backyard barbecues. I try to keep my distance from Jason, but it's no use. Everyone's noticed how we look at each other. My brother catches my eye, raises his beer in a mocking salute. Trouble in paradise? He asks. There's a smirk, but under it, there's something else in his voice. I brush it off. I need to talk to someone who doesn't see me as the sensible, reliable wife. So, I meet up with Karen, my wild friend from high school, the one who always got me into trouble. 2 margaritas in, I spill my guts. She raises an eyebrow. Oh honey, this isn't just a crush, she laughs. It never really went away, did it? That thrill, the danger. She's right. I always had a reckless streak in me, one I buried deep after I got married. A text buzzes on my phone, my stomach lurches. It's Jason, quoting a line from a poem, the one we loved in college, that I couldn't have told my husband about in a million years. It's like a secret language between us now. The pregnancy test. Those 2 damn pink lines, they're not just a confirmation, they're a sentence. My head spins. I should be happy, I guess, but all I feel is this cold dread, twisting in my gut. Jason's the father, I know it. It's like the universe is playing a sick joke, permanently tying us together with the one thing my husband always wanted. We still sneak around, pretending like it's some thrilling escape. The cabin behind my parents' place, it's our little hideaway. Musty smell of old wood, the creak of the floorboards. I'm drowning, and yet it's the only place I feel like I can breathe. One afternoon, while Jason's outside fixing the leaky roof, I'm rummaging through an old box. There's a tattered romance novel tucked inside. A folded piece of paper falls out, faded but the handwriting is unmistakable, my mother's. My eyes widen as I read the words. It's a love letter, passionate and tender, addressed to someone who isn't my dad. For a moment, I'm a scared kid again, the safe world I knew crumbling around me. I hide the letter but can't shake the feeling that I've tripped over something dangerous. Maybe I'm not the only one with secrets in this family. Weeks bleed into months, the lies are piling so high sometimes I can barely see over them. My husband's so happy about the baby, completely oblivious. I fake morning sickness, invent doctor's appointments, my friends cover for me. It's exhausting, the constant guilt and fear of getting caught. Then the baby's born, a boy. The moment the nurse puts him in my arms, I see those eyes, Jason's eyes. I hold my breath, waiting for something, anything to give me away. Nothing happens, relief floods me, a shameful relief. We bring our son home and settle into this bizarre new normal. I have a husband doting on me, a newborn that looks just like his father, and a lover desperate for more of my time. The world sees a happy family. Inside, I'm unraveling, one loose thread at a time. The ocean is supposed to be calming, but all I hear is the roar of my own guilt crashing on the shore. This, spontaneous, trip with Jason is anything but. My parents are watching our son, allowing us this desperate escape, an escape meant to convince ourselves we can still salvage something from this disaster. We play house on the beach, build sandcastles that crumble like my flimsy resolve. We rent a little cottage, and the musty old smell reminds me too much of the cabin. At night, Jason promises it'll be okay, that we'll find a way to build a real life together. His words are like flimsy rafts in a stormy sea. I want to believe him, but fear has sunk its claws into me. One evening, we sit by a bonfire, the salty air whipping the flames in my hair. It's beautiful, and I want to scream. Something breaks inside me, the words tumble out, about wishing I could turn back time, do things differently. He doesn't try to placate me with empty promises this time. I see the guilt reflected in his eyes. We both know this can't last. Jason starts talking crazy about running away together, starting over somewhere nobody knows us. It's desperate, ridiculous, and in that moment, I cling to those foolish whispers. I feel like we're drowning, and his words are the last, thin sliver of flotsam I can cling to. When we return home, everything feels different. My husband tries harder, plans a surprise date night, leaves notes under my pillow. All I see is suspicion in his eyes, a silent accusation. It's subtle, the way he questions where I've been, how long I was at the store. The lies don't flow as easily now. They're knives now, twisting in my belly. I pull away from him, inventing work crises, sudden headaches. He doesn't push too hard, he just watches me, and it's worse than an interrogation. Our son is a blur of chubby smiles and bright blue eyes. I catch myself staring at him, wondering if the truth is written in his face. Each time he chirps, "Daddy," it's like a tiny needle pricking my soul. We're a twisted parody of a perfect family, and the whole thing is about to crack wide open. My husband's favorite wine, I should be remembering our first anniversary, the awkward charm, the giddy possibility of it all. Instead, the rich red sloshing in my glass looks like blood, a stark reminder of the life I've built on lies. He's trying too hard, this date night, like he knows. He touches my hand, and I flinch. All I can think about is Jason's hands on me, just a few weeks ago at that seaside cabin. The next morning, it's not my alarm that wakes me, but the screeching of my phone. It's my sister, her voice choked with sobs. I don't need her to say the words. "Accident," she whispers, "he didn't make it." My heart stops, then pounds a frantic rhythm in my ears. The world melts away, the funeral is a blur. There's a crushing wave of grief, tinged with a guilt so heavy it threatens to drown me. My parents cling to me, offer whispered prayers and casseroles in equal measure. His family hovers, eyes sharp beneath their tears. It's only a matter of time, I know, before suspicion settles over his death like a shroud. Everything speeds up and slows down at the same time. Papers need signing, decisions loom over me, and through it all, there's the sickening secret of my relief. But it's short-lived. His family arrives in a swarm of lawyers and cold smiles. Inheritance. Of course, that's their first concern. Then it hits me. They'll want a DNA test for our son. My lawyer tells me I can probably fight it, but the doubts are already gnawing at me, little hungry worms burrowing in my brain. The day of the test, I walk into that sterile white room gripping my son's hand like a lifeline. My voice cracks as I try to explain to him what's happening. The technician is all business. Quick swab, a few maddening beeping machines, and then, silence. She offers no comfort, no flicker of understanding in her eyes. Each day after feels like I'm underwater, the weight of waiting crushing me. The results could ruin everything, expose the mess I've made. It's not just my life anymore, it's my son's. Jason wants me to run, to start over. How can I do that now? There's nowhere to hide. My hand shakes as I rip open the envelope. Just a piece of paper, but it might as well be a bomb detonating my life. I stare at the words, "not the biological father," and they swirl in front of my eyes, a sickening mantra. My stomach lurches, a bitter wave of bile rising in my throat. It's official, there's no hiding the truth anymore. The door bangs. It's my brother, his face drawn, older somehow. He doesn't need to ask. The envelope lies on the table, the verdict clear as day. "How?" he begins, and the word hangs in the air, accusatory and wounded all at once. And what can I say? I crumble, the lies spilling out like vomit, all of it, the affair, Jason, the pregnancy. Each word lands like a blow. He looks at me like I'm something he found on the bottom of his shoe, something disgusting and unwanted. He leaves, and then he doesn't. He's the one who calls my parents, sits with me as they weep, their eyes filled with a hurt and disappointment so raw it cuts deeper than any anger could. I'm not their daughter anymore, I'm the monster who broke their world. Within hours, his family knows too. The calm facade is gone. They scream accusations over the phone, scheming, manipulated, every ugly word they can conjure up. Their lawyers appear the next day, cold and sharp. This is going to get vicious. Whispers turn to headlines, the media descends, painting me as every kind of villain they can dream up. The fight for custody is like having my soul put through a shredder. They dissect my life. Every late night out, every business trip with Jason, every lie about doctor's appointments. It's brutal, humiliating, and I deserve every bit of it. It's not even about the money anymore. His family wants to erase my son from their lives completely, like I never existed. I watch my in-laws on TV, eyes blazing with hatred, and realize they won't stop until I'm utterly destroyed. They have money, connections, influence. I have nothing. I stare at myself in the mirror, exhausted, eyes dull, barely recognizing the woman I've become. How did I let it get so far? This was supposed to be my happily ever after, and I blew it up with my own two hands. The judge's words echo in the courtroom. Custody awarded to the mother. Victory? It doesn't feel like it. There are no winners here, only degrees of loss. My son stares up at me, big eyes filled with a confusion that matches my own. We are shadows to his father's family now, figures mentioned only in hushed whispers and angry phone calls. I want to shield him, but how do you explain this kind of wreckage to a child? He whimpers in his sleep, and my own nights are haunted by faces twisted in rage, by the echoing accusations of the courtroom. Each morning is a battle against the weight of my guilt, against the despair that threatens to swallow me whole. Then, an unexpected lifeline. Mrs. Byrne, my husband's old English teacher, reaches out. She sits with me on the cracked vinyl chairs of a diner, her eyes soft. He talked about you, she murmurs. With warmth. It wasn't a picture they painted. And she tells me stories, glimpses of a boy she knew long ago, a boy with hidden depths and quiet regrets. The world feels less sharp-edged for those hours we sit together. We don't talk about the trial or my choices. She just offers the unexpected gift of witnessing, a sliver of light through the cracks of my shame. Before she leaves, she says, people contain multitudes, dear. Even in darkness, there's always the possibility of growth. Then, the unthinkable. News reaches me from my brother, a bitter nugget amidst the ongoing legal battle with his family. He found a box of my husband's old things. Keepsakes, a forgotten letter. It's from a woman, revealing an affair he had years ago. Messy, hurtful, a tangle of secrets buried beneath the surface. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome in court, but it's proof. He wasn't the perfect man I thought he was. That night, I dream of him. Not the smiling groom of my memories, but a hollow-eyed version. There's no conversation, just a sense of shared burdens. It's not forgiveness I feel, but understanding. I wake up, not with joy, but a fragile sort of relief. Maybe he would have understood my choices, the desperation I felt. It doesn't change anything, but it loosens the knots in my stomach. My confidant finds me hunched over the dream journal I started to make sense of the chaos in my head. She reads over my shoulder, then sighs. This isn't healthy, she says, blunt and honest as always. You need to get away, start fresh. And a wild, impossible idea strikes. We spend days poring over maps, marking forgotten towns. She's ruthless, hacking away at my remaining ties. Sell the inheritance. That beach house my parents loved. The cabin. It's just a tomb of bad memories now. Cash it all in, leave no trace, create new identities, a clean break. It's terrifying, exhilarating, and probably crazy. But as I watch my son play, oblivious to the life we're about to upend, crazy starts to feel like the only option left. The town we choose is a speck on the map, a place where the main street is 2 blocks long and the biggest event is the Summer Crab Festival. We find a faded blue rental, just steps from the beach, the musty smell of old carpet oddly comforting in its anonymity. My confidant is ruthless, making sure there's no digital trail left behind, old accounts deleted, new identities forged with unnerving ease. I get a job at the local bookshop, and the routine is my salvation. Stacking shelves, the quiet hum of the air conditioner, the smell of old paper, it's enough to keep the nightmares at bay. My son paints seashells at the kitchen table, oblivious to how drastically I've rewritten his life. He starts school, makes friends, and his laughter echoes in our little house in a way it hasn't in months. Then the package arrives. Plain brown box, no return address. My heart thuds a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Inside is the worn copy of that collection of poems, the one with a crease at the corner of the page he loved. A tremor runs through my body. Did his family send it, some kind of cruel reminder? Or is it him, somehow reaching out from beyond? A note falls out, Mrs. Burns' elegant script. She writes that she found it while clearing out his old classroom, a forgotten relic. A chill washes over me. All this time, and a piece of him lingered, a tiny connection I didn't know existed. Maybe it's foolish, but I feel a flicker of warmth amidst the lingering fear. Sometimes, when the shop is quiet, and the sun slants in through the dusty windows, I imagine him there. I can almost feel his presence in the gentle rustle of pages, the way the sea breeze picks up, carrying a hint of something familiar. It's crazy, I know, but some days the line between this world and the next feels thin. My brother calls one day, his voice softer than I remember. He's coming to visit, he says, and he wants to bring my nephew. I picture their little boy, who's never known his cousin, playing on the beach. Suddenly, those empty stretches of sand feel full of possibility. The day they arrive, I feel a surge of nerves and a desperate sort of hope. The boys tumble out onto the sand and shriek with joy, running towards the waves like they've been brothers forever. My brother and I stand back and watch. We don't say much at first, the silence between us thick with all that's unspoken. But then he smiles, a little crooked, a little sad, and something in the tight knot in my chest loosens. Maybe forgiveness won't ever be fully spoken, but maybe it can be found in the shared laughter of children, in the way time stretches on, relentless and healing all at once. The day I tell my son the truth comes without warning. We're building a sandcastle on the beach, his laughter echoing against the endless blue of the sky. Suddenly, the words spill out of me. About his father, about Jason, about the reckless girl I was. He stops digging, looks at me with those familiar eyes, and then simply shrugs. Okay, he says, and goes back to scooping wet sand. Children, in their blunt honesty, can be both a heartbreaking and a deeply humbling experience. The visit to the grave happens on a whim. My son, a lanky teenager now, is restless, bored. It's a cool, gray day, and the cemetery feels stark and quiet. We stand there, three of us, a family bound by blood, loss, and the lingering ghosts of what might have been. I don't cry this time, just place a small bunch of wildflowers, nothing too showy or sentimental, just a splash of color against the weathered stone. Time stretches on. My son grows into a young man, bright and sharp, with a smile that can still pierce my heart with a strange mix of love and guilt. He asks questions about his father, about that part of his history. I answer truthfully, carefully, never making excuses, never glossing over the pain I cause. The past is a shadow that lingers. The old scandal has faded into the blurry background of this sleepy coastal town. Sometimes, when my son starts dating, I see whispers exchange, knowing glances. It stings, but I've built a shell of sorts around myself. I focus on my bookshop, on my son, on the simple rhythms of our life. Love comes quietly, unexpectedly. He's a regular at my shop, the kind librarian, with gentle eyes and a way of making me laugh after I'd forgotten how. He cooks me soup when I get a cold, brings me wildflowers instead of grand bouquets. I find myself wanting to tell him everything, the good and the ugly. One night, fueled by too much wine and a desperate sort of bravery, I do. The words tumble out in a jumbled rush. He doesn't look shocked, just concerned. When I'm done, he sits in silence. We don't talk about it again for weeks. It hangs between us, unspoken, but present. Yet, something shifts. A kindness grows, a quiet acceptance that's more precious than any grand romantic gestures. My son, always perceptive, notices the change in me. He becomes sullen, withdrawn, resentment simmering beneath the surface. Then, one day, he finds my old journals, hidden in a box in the attic where I thought I'd forgotten them. Inside are all the thoughts I never spoke aloud, the raw, selfish yearning, the details of my affair with Jason. He explodes. His accusations are like knives, cutting sharper than any insults his father's family ever hurled. He storms out, leaving me broken on the living room floor. I reach out to my confidant, but her tough love feels harsh this time. Desperation pushes me towards Mrs. Byrne, still that steadying force. She listens without judgment, and then says, "Give him the whole truth. It might not heal things, but there's power in owning your whole story, even the darkest parts." I give him the letter, the one I found in the cabin all those years ago. He sits on the beach, just like Jason and I did under that same moonlit sky. Hours pass as he reads. He doesn't come home that night. The next morning, he walks in, eyes bloodshot. There's no forgiveness yet, but a flicker of something softer than rage. That tiny flicker is enough for now. One rainy day, he finds me looking over photos, the albums a jumble of faces. He sits beside me without a word, and we spend hours flipping pages, remembering. It's the closest we've felt in a long time. We make a pilgrimage to the grave together. This time, there are no flowers, just an unspoken agreement. We carefully uproot the wildflowers I planted years before. The act is a strange balm. We drive to the garden center and pick a small sapling, roots bound in burlap. Together, we dig a hole at the foot of the plot and plant it. A symbol of tentative hope, of the enduring messiness of family, of the unpredictable and unstoppable way life keeps growing, even from. I never thought a simple cup of joe could flip my world upside down. But there I was, sitting across from Alex, this total stranger who somehow made me laugh more in an hour than I had in months. It was like a scene out of a cheesy romance flick, except it was my life, and boy, did it feel exhilarating. David, my fiancé, was the complete opposite of Alex. Where David was all about schedules, routines, and, well, policing, Alex was spontaneous, adventurous, and dangerously charming. I knew I was playing with fire, but the thrill was too intoxicating to resist. I started cooking up stories to see Alex, telling David the first had signed up for evening classes to better myself. It was partially true, I was learning, all right, learning what it felt like to feel alive again. David, bless him, was so supportive, telling me he was proud of me for finding something to be passionate about. If he only knew. The first time I sneaked out to meet Alex, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. We chose this quiet little restaurant on the outskirts of town, the kind of place you'd never go unless you had a reason to hide. Every laugh, every touch under the table, was laced with guilt, but I couldn't stop. Our secret rendezvous became our little routine. With David often working late, it was easy to slip away into Alex's arms. It felt wrong, but oh, so right. I was getting addicted to the rush, the secret glances, and the stolen kisses. Alex was like a drug, and I was hooked. Then came the text that changed everything. Alex wanted to whisk me away for a weekend. My heart skipped a beat at the thought. Making up a story about a work conference, I lied straight to David's face. The guilt was there, nagging at me, but the excitement drowned it out. That weekend, Alex gave me a necklace. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry, it was a symbol, a tangible reminder of our connection. I hid it in my drawer, a secret token of my betrayal. Every time I looked at it, a mix of joy and sorrow washed over me. Meanwhile, David started acting strange, his casual questions about my day feeling more like an interrogation. I brushed it off, attributing it to stress from work. But deep down, I knew my web of lies was getting too complex, too fragile. The fear of getting caught started to creep in, but it was too late. I was in too deep, and there was no turning back. Every ding of my phone felt like a ticking bomb, echoing the chaos of my double life. Here I was, crafting an art out of lies, deleting messages from Alex as soon as they popped up, and concocting alibis that even I started to believe. The thrill of sneaking around with Alex was shadowed by the dread of getting caught. It was like living on the edge of a knife, and honestly, part of me loved the adrenaline rush. But David, oh David, he wasn't the oblivious fiancé I hoped he'd be. I noticed the way his eyes lingered a bit too long, piecing together the fragments of my poorly spun tales. My heart would race not just for the excitement of my secret romance but also for fear of what lay ahead. Then came the night that could have changed everything. David, in a rare moment of spontaneity, planned a surprise dinner at our place. He wanted to reconnect, he said. But fate, or rather Alex, had other plans. A text came through, an urgent plea for one of our rendezvous, and like the fool I was, I ditched David's dinner, mumbling something about a work crisis. The guilt gnawed at me, but the pull towards Alex was stronger. Lying in Alex's arms that night, a part of me wanted to end this charade. The lies were suffocating, the deceit too heavy a burden. Yet, the thought of cutting ties with Alex, of going back to my life with David without the spark Alex ignited in me, felt like a fate worse than getting caught. Unbeknownst to me, David had grown suspicious enough to shadow my steps, his cop instincts kicking into high gear. That night, as I was lost in Alex's world, David was out there, piecing together the truth one observation at a time. The universe has a twisted sense of irony, and it played its cruel hand the night David decided to follow me. He saw my car parked not where I said I'd be, but at a secluded spot known for romantic liaisons. My heart, if it knew, would have stopped. David approached the car, his footsteps likely heavy with dread and hope intertwined. Hope that his suspicions were unfounded, that maybe, just maybe, I was there with a friend, any benign explanation to fend off the betrayal gnawing at his trust. But as he peered through the fogged-up windows, the world as we knew it shattered. There I was, in Alex's arms, the very picture of infidelity. I can only imagine how David's heart sank, the pain and betrayal etching a permanent scar. The confrontation I feared never came that night. David vanished into the shadows, his silence more deafening than any accusation. In those moments, ensnared in Alex's embrace, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside, I was at the pinnacle of my selfishness. The fallout of my actions, the heartbreak I had sown, was about to come crashing down, and I was blissfully unaware, lost in a delusion that was about to dissolve into my worst nightmare. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, it helps us create more content you love. Thank you for your support. As I melted into Alex's arms, lost in the laughter and whispers of promises we knew we couldn't keep, I was oblivious to the storm brewing just outside. My world, built on fragile lies, felt secure in that moment, a dangerous illusion that blinded me to the crumbling foundations of my life with David. David, my once devoted fiancé, had become a silent witness to my betrayal. Retreating to the sanctuary of his police car, he wrestled with a tempest of emotions. Betrayal, anger, a profound sense of loss. From the shadows, he watched the woman he loved share tender moments with another man, each laugh, each kiss, a dagger to his heart. Yet, in the throes of his pain, he found resolve. If words had abandoned him, evidence would speak volumes. In the days that followed, David became a ghost, a specter trailing my every move with a detective's precision. He collected evidence of my affair with the meticulousness of an artist, each photo, each message, a stroke in the portrait of my deceit. Meanwhile, I was adrift in a sea of denial, planning another escape with Alex, believing I could juggle my double life with the finesse of a seasoned acrobat. The thrill of the forbidden clouded my judgment, making me blind to the unraveling of the world as I knew it. But David, in his silent anguish, had not been idle. One day, he confronted Alex, embodying the cold authority of his badge. "Stay away from her," he demanded, his voice a chilling blend of warning and threat. The encounter shook Alex to his core, a testament to the seriousness of the situation we had all underestimated. Alex, caught in the crossfire of passion and peril, agreed to end the affair. Yet, his heart was at war with his mind. He had fallen for me, a reality as inconvenient as it was undeniable. The complexity of our emotions, tangled like a knot too tight to unravel, set the stage for a confrontation none of us were prepared for. Unaware of the seismic shifts occurring just beneath the surface of my duplicitous world, I continued on, blind to the impending collapse. My heart, divided between two men, was a battleground of desire and duty, a war one was destined to lose. The fabric of lies I had woven around myself was about to unravel, leaving me exposed to the harsh light of truth. In this game of hearts and deceit, the cost of my choices was about to become painfully clear. The buzz of my phone shattered the silence, a cold, impersonal text from Alex piercing through the facade of normalcy I'd clung to. "We can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." Just like that, my world tilted, leaving me gasping for air, confused, and heartbroken. I hammered out reply after reply, but silence met my pleas. Alex, the man who'd whispered sweet nothings and promised hidden tomorrows, had vanished, leaving me to drown in the aftermath of our folly. Desperate, I called him, each ring a sharp reminder of the reality I faced. But Alex was gone, swallowed by the shadows, his fear of David's retribution severing the ties that bound us. I was alone, truly alone, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. In the midst of my turmoil, a sliver of hope flickered. David, my David, maybe, just maybe, I could salvage the ruins of our relationship. I turned my focus back to him, oblivious to the storm that brewed in his silent, knowing gaze. David's invitation to a romantic evening caught me off guard, a chance, perhaps, to mend the fractures, to weave back together the tapestry of our love. But as we drove to the location, the air between us was charged, heavy with unspoken words. David's silence was a vast chasm, stretching further with each passing mile. The place he chose was no coincidence. It was the very spot where the veil of lies had been lifted, where my betrayal was laid bare under the stark moonlight. My heart raced, a premonition of the impending confrontation sending shivers down my spine. As we arrived, David's movements were deliberate, his silence finally breaking under the weight of the evidence he laid before me. Photos, texts, and, most damning of all, the necklace from Alex. Each piece a testament to my betrayal, a narrative of deceit that I could no longer deny. My attempts at explanation were feeble, desperate. "David, please, let me explain." It wasn't, but my words dissolved into the chilly air, David's expression unyielding, a mask of stone-cold finality. The man I loved, the man I had hurt beyond repair, stood before me, a stranger clad in the armor of his pain. In that moment, the magnitude of my actions crashed over me. The lies, the secret meetings, the stolen moments with Alex, all of it culminated in this singular, devastating point of no return. David, once my anchor, had become the judge of my folly, his verdict clear in the silent withdrawal of his heart. The confrontation I had dreaded, yet subconsciously anticipated, unfolded with a brutal clarity. David's evidence was irrefutable, his pain palpable, and my guilt a chasm too vast to bridge. My pleas for forgiveness, for understanding, fell on deaf ears, the chasm between us widening with each word I uttered. Caught in the web of my own making, I faced the ruins of the life I had once cherished. The man I had vowed to love and cherish stood before me, a living embodiment of the trust one had shattered. In his eyes, I saw the reflection of the woman I had become, a stranger to myself, lost in the labyrinth of choices that led us here. The confrontation, though silent and cold, was a cacophony of unspoken recriminations, a dance of shadows and regrets. As the reality of my betrayal settled in, the finality of David's judgment echoed in the void left by his departing back. The love we had shared, now a casualty of my indiscretions, lay in tatters at our feet, a poignant reminder of the cost of my actions. There's a certain kind of silence that follows the shattering of a world. The kind that echoed around me as David, with a voice empty of warmth, declared us done. "I can't trust you again," he said, and each word was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. No anger, no yelling, just the cold, hard truth cutting through the night air. I was desperate, grasping at straws, trying to stitch together what was left with pleas and promises. "David, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. We can fix this, can't we?" But my words were just whispers in the wind, futile against the storm of betrayal. He left me there, right where he found me in Alex's arms, turning his back on us, on me, on everything we had built together. It was a symbolic end, cruelly fitting, and as his car drove off into the night, the finality of it all hit me like a freight train. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in years. Walking back home was a blur, my thoughts a jumbled mess of regret and disbelief. How had I let things get so far? How could I have been so selfish? The questions circled in my mind, but no answers came. Only the heavy weight of my choices, pressing down on me. Arriving home to find my belongings piled outside was a punch to the gut. David had wasted no time erasing me from his life. Every trace of our shared existence tossed out without a second thought. It was a clear message. I was no longer welcome in the life we had shared. In the days that followed, I reached out to friends, looking for some semblance of support, but the coldness of their responses was a bitter pill to swallow. My actions had cast a long shadow, and it seemed I had lost more than just David. I had lost the trust and respect of those I cared about. In a moment of desperation, I tried to reconnect with Alex, hoping for some comfort in the familiarity of his arms. But even he was out of reach, having moved on, unwilling to entangle himself further in the mess we had created. His rejection was a sobering reminder of the consequences of my actions. The isolation was palpable, a constant companion in the empty apartment I now called home. The silence was a stark contrast to the life I had known, filled with laughter, love, and the warmth of companionship. Now, there was only emptiness, a void where my heart used to be. As the reality of my situation settled in, the magnitude of my mistake became painfully clear. I had destroyed everything for a fleeting moment of happiness, and now I was paying the price. The cost of my actions was not just the loss of my relationship with David but the loss of myself. I had become a stranger, someone capable of inflicting such pain without a second thought. The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock gave way to a deep, gnawing ache. An ache for what had been and what could never be again. I was adrift, caught in the turbulent waters of regret, with no shore in sight. In my darkest moments, I realized the truth of it all. My downfall was not just the end of a relationship, it was the shattering of the person I once was. The pieces of my former self lay scattered, a puzzle too complex to put back together. And so, I was left to navigate this new reality, a world where I was the architect of my own ruin. The journey ahead was uncertain, a path marred by the shadows of my past. But one thing was clear. The road to redemption, if it existed, was mine to walk alone. Walking into the office felt like stepping into a court of judgment. The whispers started the moment I crossed the threshold, my colleagues' eyes darting away as I approached. It was as if my personal life had become the hottest topic of office gossip, each whisper a sharp reminder of the scandal I'd unwittingly become the center of. My professional life, once a source of pride, had morphed into another battleground where I faced the repercussions of my choices. The realization of my complete and utter isolation hit me hard. The friends I once confided in, the family members who cheered on my engagement, were now distant, their interactions tinged with disappointment and judgment. It was as if my decision had erected an invisible barrier between me and the world, leaving me to navigate the aftermath alone. One day, I caught a glimpse of David from across the street. He was laughing at something his partner said, a reminder of the life and love I'd squandered. Seeing him so unaffected, moving on with his life while I was stuck in this limbo, was a painful reminder of all that I'd lost. The thought of leaving town, starting over somewhere new where no one knew my name or my shame, was enticing. Yet, as much as I yearned to escape, I knew that running wouldn't erase the guilt or the memories. My actions had rooted me to this place, a constant shadow that loomed over any possibility of a fresh start. I sought solace in solitude, trying to rebuild myself from the ground up. But the loneliness was overwhelming, each attempt at forming new relationships hampered by the knowledge of my past indiscretions. It was as if my betrayal had branded me, a mark that I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried. Meanwhile, David's career soared. I heard through the grapevine about his promotions, his commendations. It was a bittersweet realization to see him thrive while my world crumbled. His unblemished reputation as a dedicated officer stood in stark contrast to the ruins of my own making. It was a reminder that while life moved forward for him, I was trapped in the aftermath of my choices. The weight of my actions, the sheer magnitude of the fallout, became a burden I carried alone. The path to redemption, once a distant hope, now seemed like an impossible climb. The consequences of my betrayal were mine and mine alone to bear. Each day was a reminder of the cost of my choices, a price that seemed too steep to pay. As I navigated this new reality, the isolation became a constant companion. The journey towards forgiveness, towards any semblance of redemption, felt like a mirage, always just out of reach. The realization that I was the architect of my own downfall was a bitter pill to swallow, a truth that I faced each day with a heavy heart. In this landscape of broken dreams and lost connections, I found a sliver of strength in the acceptance of my fate. The road to rebuilding my life, to finding a way out of the shadow of my actions, was fraught with challenges. Yet, it was a path I knew I had to walk, a journey of self-discovery that was only just beginning. Amid the ruins of my former life, I started to understand that redemption wasn't about erasing the past but learning to live with its consequences, forging a new way forward, one small step at a time. The buzz of my phone cut through the silence like a siren, heralding a message that I knew would seal the fate of what once was. It was from David. Not a plea, not an accusation, but a simple, final goodbye. I wish you well. Take care of yourself. That was it. No anger, no lingering hope, just a clean break, a closure that left no room for doubt. There was no path back to us, to what we had. Nights became my solace and my torment. I'd walk the streets we once explored together, each step a painful echo of memories. Our favorite coffee shop, the park bench where he'd wrap his arm around me, the laughter that seemed to hang in the air, now just ghosts that haunted me. The city that once felt like an extension of our love story now felt like a maze of missed turns and dead ends. In a desperate attempt to fill the void, I threw myself into community activities, hoping to find a sense of belonging, a distraction from the ache. But whispers followed me like a shadow, my past mistakes casting me as the pariah in any group I dared to join. The loneliness clung to me, a reminder that sometimes, the cost of our actions is paid in the currency of social exile. Then, on a whim, I adopted a pet, a small, scrappy dog with eyes full of unconditional love. In his companionship, I found a sliver of solace, a presence that didn't judge, didn't whisper. He became my shadow, my silent confidant in a world that seemed to have turned its back on me. One evening, as I walked him through the park, I saw a couple locked in an embrace so full of love and trust. It was a stark, painful reminder of what I had lost, of the trust one had so carelessly squandered. The sight of them was a punch to the gut, a visceral reminder of the cost of my choices. In the depths of my solitude, I turned to writing, pouring my pain and regret onto the pages. It was a somber endeavor, but in the act of writing, I found a release, a way to navigate through the storm of emotions that threatened to drown me. Each word was a step towards understanding, towards accepting the harsh lessons of my actions. Occasionally, I'd see Alex in town, each encounter a sharp sting, a reminder of the folly that had led me to this point. We never spoke, our eyes barely meeting, but the weight of what had transpired hung heavily between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the wreckage left in the wake of our affair. Now, living a life irrevocably altered by my decisions, I understand the harsh lesson of my betrayal. The consequences of my actions have marked me, shaping a new existence from the ashes of the old. My story has become a cautionary tale, not just of loss and regret, but of the profound impact our choices have on the trajectory of our lives. This journey, marked by solitude and reflection, has taught me the true cost of betrayal. It's a lesson in the value of trust, the fragility of love, and the strength required to face the aftermath of our actions. In the end, I've come to realize that the hardest paths often lead to the deepest insights, and perhaps, in this new chapter of solitude and penance, I'll find a way to forge a sense of peace with the past, embracing the solitude not as punishment, but as a path. I, 40 male, and my wife, 32 female, had just moved into a new neighborhood and we didn't know anybody there. Thankfully, through our children, we were able to meet some cool couples that we could hang out with. One of those couples, let's call them Larry and Pam, was especially cool to us. We had a lot of the same interests and they lived this sort of jet-setting lifestyle even though they had kids. It was something that my wife and I thought was impossible before we met them. The four of us hit it off and we spent a lot of time together. It helped that our children were close too. It worked out very well when we wanted to go out and have double dates. We could travel and we had them to talk to about things going on with our kids. After a few months of knowing them, I started to notice that Larry was a little flirty. I joked about it one time when he was flirting with my wife, just telling him to back off because she's taken. Pam shrugged her shoulders and assured me that he was just a flirt and didn't mean anything by it. I was confident in my relationship and I wasn't worried about a little flirting. I've always been under the impression that it was harmless as long as it didn't evolve into anything else. But the flirting continued. It happened often enough that I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with it. My wife was gorgeous. This isn't saying that Pam wasn't, but Larry would have been crazy not to want my wife, but I wasn't sure if he was respecting our boundaries. Pam and Larry sent their kids to a summer camp every year and they were able to convince my wife and I to send our kids to the same one. The idea behind it was if the kids were all away for 2 weeks, we could take a grown-up vacation without them. It honestly sounded great. My wife and I were looking forward to going away with them. We thought that it would be a great opportunity to take time for ourselves and almost have a second honeymoon of sorts. In the weeks leading up to our departure, my wife had been growing a little bit distant. I kind of chalked it up to thinking that she was going to miss our kids while we were gone. 2 weeks away from them was more than we'd ever spend apart and I knew it would be hard for her. But I noticed that she was making secret phone calls and texting people very privately. I was a little curious about what was happening. The day of the departure came and we joined Pam and Larry at a vacation rental we all went on together. It was right on the beach, there was a jacuzzi tub on the porch, there was a large smoker grill, and we had high-end luxurious accommodations. It was heavenly. The first night that we were there, we bought some beer and wine and we all sat outside after I manned the grill and got the little trunk. I noticed that my wife and Larry were once again very flirty. I was in high spirits so I once again laughed it off. I went to bed and when I woke up the next morning my wife was not there. When I got up and moved around the house, I saw that she was out by the water in her bathing suit and going for a swim. That would have been fine had Larry not been there with her. He was shirtless in his swimming trunks standing very close to her. He was clearly looking her over in her bathing suit and my wife made no effort to divert his gaze. Right away I walked out and joined them. They both welcomed me as if nothing was going on, which made me feel a little better. I still didn't like Larry ogling my wife so I practically dragged him back to the house. Later that night all of us went out dancing. Again we had some drinks and we were getting tipsy. On the dance floor I noticed that Larry was gravitating toward my wife. At this point I was moving past the laughing it off phase. He was constantly around my wife and it was rubbing me the wrong way. What was even more infuriating about it was that my wife was letting it happen. He would go over to her and put his hands on her waist and she would lean into him. Did she think it was me? Was she that drunk? I waited until the following morning to ask my wife about it. She laughed it off and told me that I had nothing to worry about. She apparently didn't even remember dancing with Larry. On the third and final day of our vacation, shit hit the fan. We were supposed to stay at the vacation rental for 6 days, but I ended up having to leave early because I walked in on Larry with my wife. We had gone the entire day without any issues aside from me catching glimpses of Larry looking at my wife in her bikini. I was happy with what my wife had told me and I wasn't going to worry about it. But of course, as soon as you let your guard down, you realize that you were right all alone. We wanted to throw some stuff on the grill, so I was out back doing that. Pam was with me and helping to skewer some chicken and vegetables. I hadn't even noticed that my wife and Larry were missing. I ran inside to grab some more meat from the fridge and I heard some shuffling from the laundry room. I paused and listened carefully to what it was. I could hear what was clearly two people trying to be quiet while having sex. I opened the door right away and saw my wife pinned against the wall with Larry in front of her. They were in the middle of having sex. They were so into it that they almost didn't even notice me walking in. Moments after I opened the door, Pam walked inside to grab some more vegetables and saw them too. She screamed at Larry and he jumped backward, dropping my wife on the ground. Both of them looked at us like deer in headlights. They never thought we would catch them. I just walked away and went to pack my bags to leave. My wife chased me up to the room and tried to beg me not to leave and to forgive her. She said that he meant nothing. He had just been there at the right time. I had absolutely nothing to say to that. Was the laundry room the right time? It didn't make any sense and I was done with it. I told her to get away from me and she did. I noticed that her phone was on the nightstand in the bedroom charging, so I went through it just to see how long it had been going on. It had been going on for weeks from what I could tell. It seems like she and Larry had been messaging each other about how excited they would be to go to the beach house. Larry told my wife that he was more excited to see her in a bathing suit than anything else. At first my wife replied saying that it was inappropriate, but he then pursued it more. She ended up confessing to him that she had thought he was attractive and she didn't mind a little secrecy in her life. They met up once before we all went to the beach house and had sex in our kitchen. I found Pam and I told her about everything I learned through my wife's phone and she was just as hurt as I was. She and I ended up leaving the beach house together and going back home. The entire drive back we were talking about how angry we were and how we wanted to ruin their lives. They didn't get to cheat on us and just be happy after. When I got married, my mother encouraged me to get a prenuptial agreement. I wasn't the wealthiest person in the world, but I had received an inheritance before I met my wife and I had a comfortable nest egg. On top of that, I had a good job that paid me well and gave me good benefits. It was enough so my wife didn't have to work. Our agreement clearly stated that if we were to divorce, she would be given a percentage of my assets, with the exception of if we divorced due to her infidelity or her betrayal of our marital vows. Because she cheated, I could leave her without fear of losing a penny. That was the best thing that I could think of to get her where it hurt. She didn't come home until the following day, which made me question if she was just taking advantage of the time she had with Larry. I told her about how we would be getting divorced and how I wanted her out of the house, and she swore that I couldn't do that to her. She told me that she would have rights and that in our divorce she was entitled to half of everything. It almost seemed like she wanted that all along. I questioned if she ever loved me to begin with. I reminded her about our prenuptial agreement and I watched the indignation in her eyes fade as she realized she was going to be completely screwed. Pam and I both ended up divorcing our spouses. I didn't have to pay a cent to my wife and I ended up selling the house. Now I'm just trying to pick up the pieces that were left behind in all the mess. I know that there are still some good people out there, but I just have to find them. OP, I can't believe you had to go through all of that. It's heartbreaking to find out that your partner is cheating on you, and it's so much worse when it's with a friend. You were definitely right to be suspicious about Larry's flirting with her. For anyone to blatantly flirt with a married woman in front of their wife, they clearly don't have any respect for boundaries. The fact that they were stupid enough to continue their affair while all of you guys were at the house is honestly baffling. It doesn't even seem like they were trying to hide what they were doing. I'm glad you were able to come out on top in the divorce. It definitely sounds like she was banking on being favored by the courts. Your mother was smart when she convinced you to sign the prenup. I can't help but wonder if she saw something in your wife that you didn't. I hope that you and can move past this and find new partners that will treat you guys properly. I wish you the best. Now let's move on to our next story. My wife and I met 8 years ago in a bar. She was attractive and single and so was I. We hit it off and after that we pursued a relationship together. She gave me some of the best years of my life. I started a family with her and I really thought that we were going to grow together. Unfortunately, I found out that she was having an affair with her boss. Because of that we divorced. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to experience and I just want to find a way to move on from it. But here's the story anyway. We had just bought a house and we were undergoing a lot of stress with remodeling and moving. On top of that, both my wife and I were working a lot in our respective careers to try to make our way up the ladder. I work as a copywriter and she is a journalist. She was very close with her boss and all the other employees at the paper she worked for. I know that she saw her boss as sort of a mentor for her when she started. He helped her master writing in her field and he often gave her special stories to cover that fit her interests. I knew the man well also. He was a widower and my wife had a lot of sympathy for him because she was worried about him being alone all the time. His children had moved out of the house and he lived by himself. At first I thought that the relationship was harmless. Years had gone by and he was more of a father figure to her than anything else. Finding out that he was the person that she had been having an affair with was beyond shocking. I started to notice that things were off when she was spending more time in the office. Her job is easily one that she doesn't even have to go in for. She has a home office that she can work from whenever she wants to, but she chooses to go in because it helps her focus and she enjoys socializing with her coworkers. When she told me that she would have to be staying late, I questioned why she wouldn't just come home and work in the office. Certainly that was better than staying in an office building by herself. She could have had dinner with her family and then went right to work. Having it happen one time would have been something to forget about, but when she was staying late in the office 2 or 3 times a week, I had some red flags waving. Normally I wouldn't assume that she was cheating on me, but I had read a lot of Reddit posts and confessions from people who were being cheated on. I started to worry if maybe that was the case here. I honestly didn't even know where to begin with trying to find out if she was cheating on me. I decided that the best thing to do would be just to observe some of her habits and behaviors and see if everything was all in my head. The more I watched her, the more I realized there might have been something going on. Another thing that I noticed was how she would tilt her phone away from me when she looked at it. It was odd, that wasn't something she had ever done before that I was aware of. If she wasn't trying to hide anything, I didn't understand why she would tilt it. I was starting to work myself up thinking that she was having an affair, so I decided to take the plunge and hire someone who could dig around. I found a local private investigator who took on the case. After I told him everything I was suspicious about, he decided that the best place to start would be at her work. He waited outside around the end of her work day to see if he could follow her and see where she was going. On the second day that he was working, I got a text message from my wife telling me that she would be staying late in the office. I immediately told the private investigator about that so they would keep a close eye on her building to see where she went if she left. However, she didn't leave the office. When she eventually did, the private investigator followed her to our house. It seemed like she really was staying late at the office. I told the private investigator that I was clearly in the wrong for what I was doing and I wanted to call them off. They ended up convincing me that there still could have been something going on in the office. I thought it was silly, but I told them that I would pay for another day just to rule that out, and then if they didn't find anything I would terminate our contract. Sadly, they found something. My wife was yet again staying late in the office and the private investigator found her in her boss's office performing oral sex on him. He got some pictures and videos of it for me. When he showed me, I was shocked and disturbed and I felt like the world was falling out from under my feet. I had my suspicions, but I never wanted to confirm them. Part of me had been hoping that hiring the private investigator would just prove that my wife was faithful. Her boss was like a father figure to her, so I couldn't comprehend how they even started an affair. Regardless of my confusion, I was done with her. I had given her everything I possibly could and she was throwing it back in my face. I felt a lot of pity for myself, but after wallowing in that for a while, I was angry. I wanted to show them that they couldn't both just treat me the way they did without there being consequences. There was a rival newspaper in the area that I remembered my wife always talking about. Her paper and the other were always trying to one-up each other. I had the perfect story for them. Before I sent an article to the rival magazine, I met with the HR manager of the newspaper my wife worked at. I told them about everything that happened and how they were having sex in the office, showing them the evidence. It was a clear violation of their policy, and they assured me that they would both be dealt with. 2 days after I did that, my wife came home in tears, complaining about how she was fired. She didn't tell me what happened. She lied and said that she was laid off due to budget cuts. I was partially surprised that she continued with the lie, but at the same time she had already lied so much. When I knew that she was fired, I sent an email to the newspaper. I got a response saying that they were going to cover the story, but they needed to put a spin on it to make it more marketable. Otherwise it would have just looked like revenge porn. The story that they ran with was about a boss sleeping with his worker and getting them both fired. They put the picture I attached in, though they blurred the faces of my wife and her boss. Because my wife worked for the rival paper, we never had that one at home. However, that morning I made a special stop to go and grab the latest issue of the newspaper. I sat right at the kitchen table and opened it up in front of her while I drank my coffee. Right on the back of the paper was the article with a picture of her in her boss's office performing sexual acts on him. She nearly spit out her coffee when she saw it. She yanked it out of my hand and read the article while I sat there with my arms crossed in front of me. She didn't say anything, probably because she didn't think I realized what was on the paper. As she was reading it, I commented on how funny it was that the article mentioned a boss and an employee getting fired the very same day that she was. That clued her into my knowledge about her affair. She tried to explain herself and told me that it was a one-time thing, but I didn't believe her. She was mad that I had the article published. It's hindsight. I do feel like I went a little too far with that. We lived in a small town and everybody saw that article. It wouldn't have taken a lot of brain power to figure out who it was. We ended up getting a divorce. We had a prenup, so thankfully I didn't know her anything. We sold the house and split everything down the middle. It's just hard to believe that something like this would happen to me. I've been loyal and trustworthy throughout our entire marriage, and I never expected that. I know it's going to take a lot to move on from, but I'm hoping I can heal soon. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that. It's difficult to admit to yourself that there is the possibility your partner is cheating, but you do need to trust your gut in some situations. You definitely did the right thing by hiring a private investigator to do digging for you when you didn't know how. From the way it sounds, their affair had been going on for quite some time. It's curious to think about how they started their affair when their relationship was very clearly almost father-daughter-like. It's always so interesting to me when people have affairs in the office they work in and don't expect anybody to ever catch them. In my opinion, that's just karma coming and getting back at you. I hope you're able to heal from this and you won't let this hold you back in future relationships. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.